Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Terrible Leader, where real leaders share the raw truth about the lessons they learned the hard way, so you don't have to. Join our host, Lacey Nelson, founder of Transcend Leadership Collective and former terrible leader. Every leader can become worthy of being followed if they are willing to put in the work. On this podcast, we share the messy stories and behind-the-scenes reality of what the work actually entails. We welcome you to this community of revolutionary leaders who believe honest communication, healthy conflict, and building cultures of acceptance, respect, and trust are not only possible, but non-negotiable for cultivating world-class teams.
Welcome back to Confessions of a Terrible Leader. I'm your host, Lacey Nelson, and also, let's not forget, a former terrible leader. Today, I have someone with us that I am so ready to ask like a million hard questions of. She is, let's start with her alphabet after her name. She is MSW, so Masters of Social Work, and a licensed clinical social worker, Miss Julia Nepini, and she is based out of Massachusetts. She owns and founded and is the owner of the Compassionate Counseling Company, and also helps other people that want to open up a counseling agency. She helps them figure out how to make that happen. So, Julia, welcome to the show. Thank you for making time for us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. So initially the name drew me in, but then as we got to chatting, this was absolutely where I was meant to be today.
Fantastic. For the listeners that might not know, I have my bachelor's of social work. So we had that immediate connection of speaking the same language and understanding some just core foundational things that we could shorthand a lot of immediate values alignment. So that was fun. Fun to definitely have that. Julia, tell us about your counseling company. When did you found it?
I started it in February 2017. I was working at a hospital at the time and a group practice that wasn't my own. And it was time for me to do my own thing. My daughter was starting school and I really needed a flexible schedule. I wasn't really feeling appreciated or acknowledged at the places that I was working and felt like being my own boss really made sense. And I had an affinity for the business side. I enjoyed it so much more than I ever anticipated. And it took off from there. So I hired my first clinician in May 2021 and we've just continued to grow.
And how many clinicians do you have on your team now?
We are in a period of transition and it's hard to keep track. We're definitely over 20 at this point.
Whoa.
We have some that are transitioning into their own practices, which is really exciting. We have some others that are onboarding and starting. We're actively hiring. And then we also have an administrative assistant and a biller.
Okay. Wow. Just logistically going from a team of me, 2017, yourself, just you, to a team of, wow, now you've got 20 people that are looking to 20 plus that are looking to you every day for direction, for guidance, for casting the vision, setting the game plan.
Mm-hmm.
I am imagining the learning curve was pretty steep in that regard.
You are not kidding. So I had not previously been in any type of a managerial or leadership role before I hired anyone.
Mm-hmm.
I had some supervisory responsibilities and was definitely a high performer in places that I had worked before, but never actually had that title or experience.
Yeah. What has been one of the most surprising things in making that transition into that new function?
How much I would learn about myself. Similar to a romantic relationship, becoming a parent, and being in this type of a role, I have been forced to learn about myself, my strengths, my weaknesses. You can't ignore them. They can't be avoided. If you want to be a good boss or a good leader and you want to create a strong, solid team, you have to own your stuff and you have to work on it because otherwise it's going to keep coming up and infiltrate the team that you want to create.
Yes, you do definitely have to, whether you want to or not, you are now going to know yourself at a deeper level. All the great parts and the ugly parts all come to service.
Exactly.
Whew. What's one thing you learned about you that you don't know that you would have had the opportunity to understand about yourself had you not gone down this path?
That is a great question. So I pride myself on being self-aware. I am one of those people that firmly believe if you're going to get into this profession, you should not be providing therapy if you have not been in your own therapy. I grew up with a mom who was a psychiatric nurse. So mental health was something that was always really encouraged, and you were acknowledged for kind of recognizing when you need help and seeking that help. And so from a very young age, I really tried to learn about myself and understand and was very open. But I would say that in this role now, looking back, something that I now know about myself, I would say much more about my personality type, my motivations, and my core fears. So I'm a big fan of the Enneagram. I learned about that personality test when I was throughout this journey of hiring and growing my team.
Mm-hmm.
And I use it with all of my consulting clients and all of my team members. But it all started with figuring out my number, reading all there was to know about it, totally resonated, felt understood, seen, heard in ways that I never had before, and using that to continue the growth process for myself, but to manage interactions with other people in my life.
Oh my gosh. We are also huge fans of the Enneagram. All of my clients have to take it. I'm like, if I'm going to coach you,
I need to know your number and your wing. Let's hear it.
I am an 8 wing 7.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm a 1 wing 2. And yeah, I mean, now that I know that, I just like wear that on my sleeve. That's my badge of honor.
Yes. Yes. I love it. And people that have no idea what this means, go research the Enneagram. You're going to have your mind blown. I love it so much more. I find it so much more useful than the DISC tool. It does have an appropriate place in the workplace, and it's such a valuable tool. So before I get us too far down that rabbit hole, because that could be a whole 1-hour discussion easily, when you were deciding this is the pathway that I want to walk down, I'm going to open this business, I want more flexibility in my life, how long did it take you to ramp up from where you're at? I mean, you said 2017 and now we're in 2024 and you have bajillionized, I'm really good at math, your organization. So how long did that ramp up take? Was it really quick? Was it like you went from 0 to, was it that exponential growth component, that Nike swoosh that we often see?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways it was, but I would say the leading up to it was a little bit more gradual. So I started off solo part-time in February 2017. February 2019 is when I transitioned to full-time, left my other job, solely focused on the practice. And then that following January 2020, I brought on some independent contractors. So I started off there. They were people that were already independently licensed. They wanted to learn some of the business side, build a caseload, and hadn't had any previous counseling experience. So that's really where I got my first exposure to kind of taking somebody under my wing, but knowing that their goal was their own practice, helping them get there, seeing them take off, soar, be successful. And then when they transitioned out of the practice, I realized I had all of these systems and processes and knowledge in place, and I was lonely. I had more referrals than I knew what to do with, and I had this desire to be part of a team again and really miss that opportunity to come together and collaborate and pick each other's brains, because there's so much gray area in our profession, and it really promotes longevity to normalize a lot of our experience and share that with one another. So I hired people in clusters, and I would try to bring on 2 people at a time if I could. It didn't always work out that way, but it was nice to have 2 people that were kind of coming up in the ranks around the same time. And we take insurance. So there's a credentialing process and kind of a hurry up and wait in the beginning stage. But I would say that kind of cluster by cluster, it definitely was exponential growth.
Nice. Nice. I love hearing people's pathways because we all have this little bit different story. And I always like to emphasize for everyone, progress is never linear. All of us are on this roller coaster that we hope is trending up, but there's lots of loop-de-loops where we feel like we're going to fall out and we're not buckled in. It's part of the process. One of the things that we like to help people do is understand, first of all, what central nervous system regulation is and how to regulate and how to recognize when they're dysregulated. And we liken it to when you learn that skill set, because it truly is a skill set, you are much less likely, because we're coaching executives and leaders, you're much less likely to get motion sickness from all the loop-de-loops. And that's what pulls people out of leadership and why businesses often, when they don't make it, they don't make it because they weren't profitable, but there's so much behind that statement of how they got there. And a lot of it is just a lack of tolerance for riding that crazy roller coaster that really does do a number on you emotionally. And it's exhausting. If you do have the skills to deal with it, you're going to have some really hard days. When you don't, it can be completely defeating.
Mm-hmm.
So that leads me to my next question that I had. Then I said I had a few selfish questions that I wanted to put out there. Being part of this industry where one of our pillars of service is coaching executives, we're exposed to a lot of organizations that offer coaching, and having my BSW and understanding some things around boundaries and what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. I would love to hear from you. If someone's a consumer and they're looking for a coach, what's the difference between a coach and a counselor or a therapist?
Mm-hmm.
That's my part one.
Okay.
And my part two is, what are the massive red flags that your coach is crossing a line where nope, actually that's out of scope for them and that's not going to serve you well in the long run?
So I'll do my best to answer this because this could be its own episode as well. But what I will say is that my understanding of therapist versus coach is that as a coach, you're thinking athletic coach. You are side by side. You go into the process as equals. It's somebody that's rooting you on, cheering for you, holding you accountable, helping you with something very specific. So maybe it's a coach on leadership, or maybe it's a coach on self-care and nutrition and wellness. And so that's their lane. And so it's kind of a simultaneous process where you're working together alongside one another. With therapy, it's obviously somebody that requires a different level of training.
Yep.
And so they are more equipped, or should be, to handle a lot more than just that one specific thing that you'd be going to a coach for, where they can potentially help you with some of that deep-rooted past stuff. They can help you make the connections between things that happened previously in your life and what's going on now. They can actually provide treatment. And so you may bring up the same topic that you would with your coach that you would a therapist, but their approach to dealing with that issue is going to be very different. So the coach is going to be much more present and future oriented, and that therapist has that ability to deal more with the past, if that makes sense. And you're going to them because they have that training and specialty, as opposed to someone who is more there for accountability, support, and hopefully that helps. So the part two would be that the red flag piece. So if you have a coach that is not staying in that lane. So if you are somebody who is really struggling with more than just the thing you originally came to see that coach for, or throughout that coaching process, you realize that there really are some more things at play there than you realize, you could potentially continue the coaching, but that coach should be able to advise you, or you yourself could recognize that maybe getting that additional support and working on some of those other things will help you to be more successful with the thing you came to coaching for.
Absolutely. Thank you, first of all, for bringing clarity to those boundaries. And as a coach who's aware of, I do know, because of my degree, because of my past experience, I'm not practicing counseling right now. I'm not licensed. I know how to, but I'm not going to, because that is not the relationship, nor just ethically, I haven't stayed up on what I need to feel like I could go in and do that. And so it's been, a few minutes since I graduated. So one of the things that I will say, though, that is very powerful is being able to refer to a trusted network of counselors, so that I can say, for instance, if I have a client that is sharing with me, I think that this is connected to this trauma I experienced as a kid. And I know they're dead right. I'm like, yes, I saw that 3 months ago, but this is not my, lane. But they've uncovered that and they are bringing it to me as an observation. It is at that point that I can say, there's probably a lot to unpack there, that I want to make sure you're with the right guide to do that. And it's not me. I can continue to help you talk about leadership, and I can continue to coach you on engaging with your clients. And if you do go to, I recommend a therapist, counselor, you do go to a counselor, and you want to share anything with me, of course, it's confidential, and we can look at how is what you're learning there applicable to what you're doing in leadership. But I can't be the one that helps them uncover those discoveries rooted in past issues and past traumas.
I'm happy to hear that's how you operate. It's good for people to hear this.
Yes, do no harm. I mean, that's the biggest thing I want people to realize, is you have to take accountability for the level of influence and impact you have. And it's a lot when people are trusting you with things and pain. In their minds, the line is completely blurred. So it is our job to set that line very clearly between coach and counselor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Thank you for platforming my soapbox moment and helping me to spread the word.
You got us there.
It makes me really happy to know that there are so many organizations out there like yours, and we can always use more. Like you said, you were drowning in referrals. Do you still find that? Like you have more referrals than you even can dole out to your over 20?
Absolutely. So we're an insurance-based practice, and we're fortunate, the area that we're in, the reputation that we have a waiting list of over 150 people at any given time.
Wow.
And we're averaging 40 plus referrals every week, which is insane because we're post-pandemic, and I feel like there are more providers doing this work than ever. And it just speaks to what you were saying. There's so much need.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. It's time to step into the confessional and to share. I mean, obviously you have grown so quickly as a business. You've had to learn how to lead people in a very short window with a group that's growing quickly. And you were brave enough to volunteer yourself to come on and share your mistakes with the world. Share with us your story around that mistake, that man, this is what happened. And if I can spare some people some pain, please, here's my story. The floor is yours.
Yes. And fortunately, through the consulting work that I do, I have been able to help others avoid this mistake. So when I came into my own practice, and especially that time when I was transitioning to group and made the decision to bring other clinicians on, I vowed to myself that if I was going to do it, I had to create the type of practice that I'd want to work for. And I wanted to correct a lot of the things that were not present in places that I had been previously. And so one of those things was to be paid well. The entire time that I was in graduate school, I got the message, and I get the impression this is changing from the new grads that I've associated with, but that if you were going into this profession, you should not expect to be making good money. And so that stuck with me. And I'm not somebody who's driven by money at all. I don't think that will ever be the case. But as we know, to be in a business, you have to be profitable in order to be successful. So when I started hiring clinicians, I was leading with more emotion than the logistics. And I hadn't done the math properly. And I was going based off of, instead of the math, kind of the average in the area of what clinicians were getting reimbursed, what I felt was fair and reasonable, and ultimately found out very quickly that it was not sustainable. So I started off offering clinicians a much higher percentage split than was financially sustainable in the business, and had to have that dreaded discussion a few months in that in the next 3 months, we are going to have to unfortunately adjust that percentage. Here's the reason why. It was my mistake. Here was the reason behind it. Here's what I'm going to do to fix it. I offered to meet with everybody individually if they wanted to see the spreadsheet and the breakdown and the numbers so that they could understand it more. But that's never an easy conversation to have. And I am fortunate to say that out of that original cluster of clinicians that I hired, I lost one that was planning to start her own practice anyways. And that was kind of more of that push that she would start that sooner. And so I had several of those clinicians that remained with me after that. And I really do think that it ultimately brought us closer. We became more of a cohesive team because as hard as it was, I was vulnerable, I was honest, I owned it, and they were able to get a little bit more of the kind of behind the curtain experience. And hopefully that led them to have the confidence that I would continue to be forthcoming and that we could get through something like that.
Yeah. That is, first of all, it's a testament to how much work you did put in relationship building that you only lost one. And the reason that you lost the one was because she wasn't disgruntled. She was like, this might have been the push I needed to go do what I was going to do.
Right.
Why do you think? What did you do? I mean, next time the lesson, do your math first.
Absolutely.
And I think I also am wired that way where I tend to be over generous. Like I want to give the farm away. Let's give it all away. And I definitely have been in experiences and situations where I'm like, oh, wow, I just way overpaid for this service or for whatever it was. And having to back out of that or write the course, the fact that you had the transparency, the communication, the relationship, what were you doing in the formation that allowed you, if you reverse engineering it, to be able to have that conversation of, hey, I really screwed up and I know this is impacting you and I am owning it. And here's the spreadsheet. That level of transparency in and of itself is uncommon in most businesses. there's businesses I work with where the people very close to the top still aren't seeing the numbers.
Yeah.
So how did you know that that was what you needed to do, I guess is what I'm asking.
So I would say a couple of pieces to that. The first was obviously looking at the bank account and seeing it dwindle faster than money was coming in. But I would also say that another component was I have the ability to be good at math and conceptualize the numbers, but it doesn't come as naturally to me as the emotion and what I do for a living. So it was really about seeking out that guidance and finding an accountant that could explain that to me.
Yeah.
And fortunately having a partner that is very numbers minded, where we could sit down and create a spreadsheet and we input all of the formulas and did a per clinician breakdown of average income and then all of those expenses, factoring in taxes, benefits, and coming up with a kind of profit per clinician. And it really gave us that projection. And there's a lot to it because you have to factor in all of these things.
Yep.
You have to do it on a regular basis, at least quarterly, because those numbers change. And never having run a business or been in this position, even though I know that and that can help me to give myself some grace, that's not something you can use as an excuse when you hire people. They're looking to you to pay their bills, make sure that their paychecks come on time, make sure the lights turn on, take care of all of the behind the scenes stuff. And so I was fortunate to find the people that I needed that could help me to do the math and come up with the figures that I wish that I had in the beginning, rather than just this average. And, oh, well, I did the loose numbers, but I didn't actually have it charted out in that way where I could input and play around and project. That was the big piece. Oh, this looks good now. But then what happens when they're not seeing enough clients? What happens when an insurance company hasn't paid you for 2 months because they're backlogged or they're having an issue? The things that you don't always think about if you haven't been in that situation before.
Yes, 100%. And it is not uncommon for people in the helping industry to have that story. Because we're all about the heart and the numbers roughly pencil out. They should be, this looks good. It's approximate. Yeah, absolutely. My accountant is so important to the business. Really, really helps me see those things now as well, resonate with your story.
Yeah. But I found that a lot of people did. And so as I felt more comfortable to speak out about it, because it can be tough and there's that kind of shame and guilt, and I had to work through that. But the more I talked about it, the more I realized that other people had been on both ends of that, whether being in a position as a business owner where they operated in a similar fashion, or even learning more of what the experience was like being a clinician or an employee on the other end, and realizing that it was fixable and it was something that I could make adjustments and in a certain period of time start to see things shift in another direction. And it has made me a much better consultant because I've got grit. I've got some, hardships that I've overcome, and it's made me so much better.
Yeah. Oh. Thank you for sharing your story and your honesty and your transparency with the numbers, not being great at the numbers game and learning how to get great. I bet you're great now. I bet you're actually top. You learned the hard way, and that usually creates a pretty good turnaround.
Well, that spreadsheet is accessible to anybody that works with me for consulting. So if they're in solo practice and they're considering transitioning, then we do that math as part of our process before they hire their first clinician.
Beautiful. I love it. I bet that's a very popular worksheet with your people. That's wonderful. Well, before we let you go today, my last question that I have, and you walked us through how it impacts how you work, with people today and how you're different and tracking your numbers. So the closing question is, what would you say to Julia, young Julia, who is just starting to think back when you're like, time to change. I know I'm in the right field, but there's a different model. There's a different way. I don't need to do this through the hospital group anymore. What would you tell her with the knowledge and the wisdom, hard one, that you have now?
I would just tell her that she is stronger and more capable than she ever imagined, and to not allow anything to hold her back from what it is that she wants to do, and that those hard times are going to be there, but they're ultimately going to help her to be better and to grow and to have that ripple effect and to potentially help other people avoid the same mistakes. And it's just going to add to the experience and enhance all of the work that is being done, even though it may not feel like it in the moment.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, where can people find you? I'm sure you've got some people interested. They want that spreadsheet. They want to connect with you. Where do they go look for you?
Yes, I would love that. So I offer a free consult to anyone to just get to know them, teach a little bit more about how I work and what I do. So Compassionate Consulting Company is the name of that business, and it's compassionateconsultingcompany.com. I am on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I post content all the time. I am having so much fun with content creation and reels and music and videos, but also just sharing really valuable tools like difference between a therapist, a coach, and a consultant, or pay structures, fee structures. How are you going to pay your team? And I share a lot of what I'm reading and learning and trainings I attend. So hopefully people will follow along and listen into the Compassionate Climb podcast. It's all about business success and how do we achieve that while maintaining integrity and staying within our values.
Beautiful. Beautiful. We will include all of your links in the show notes. So people, you did not have to be writing frantically. It's all there for you, just a click away. And thank you everyone for your time today. Thank you, listeners. Julia, you were fantastic. Your knowledge, your wisdom, your insight. I learned from you in our conversation today. So thank you very much for your time. And to all of our listeners, until next time, go manage like a leader.
Thanks for being part of this community of revolutionary leaders who believe honest communication, healthy conflict, and building cultures of acceptance, respect, and trust are not only possible, but non-negotiable for cultivating world-class teams. If one-to-one coaching, engaging workshops, or strategic planning that is actually useful are anything that interests you, make sure to head over to transcendleadershipcollective.com to check out our free resources. Confessions of a Terrible Leader is hosted by Lacey Nelson and produced by Mary Scott. Music is by Leif Olson and Mary Scott from the band The Number of Months. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave us a review. And until next time, go manage like a leader.